Itham munistu paramed vyavasthito Vijnana drig virya surandhitashayah Svaparshina pidyagudam tato nilam Sthaneshu shatshunama yejchittaklammaha Itham munistu paramed vyavasthito Vijnana drigvirya surandhitashayah Svaparshnina pidyagudam tato nilam Sthaneshu shatshunama yejchittaklammaha Itham munistu paramed vyavasthito Vijnana drigvirya surandhitashayah Svaparshnina pidyagudam tato nilam Sthaneshu shatshunama yejchittaklammaha Itham munistu pamared vyavasthito Vijnana drigvirya surandhitashayah Svaparshnina pidyagudam tato nilam Sthaneshu shatshunnyama yejchittaklammaha Itham munistu paramed vyavasthito Vijnana drigvirya surandhitashayah Svaparshina pirya tato nulam Sthaneshu satsunyam yejchittaklammaha Itham munistu paramed vyavasthito Vijnana drigvirya surandhitashayah Svaparshina pidyagudam tato nilam Sthaneshu satsunyam yejchittaklammaha the G's. Itham munistu paramed vyavasthito Vijnana drigvirya surandhitashayah Svaparshina pidyagudam tato nilam Sateshu Okay, word by word. Itham, thus, by Brahman realization. Munihi, the philosopher. Tu, but. Uparamet, should retire. Vyavasthitaha, well situated. Vijnana drik, by scientific knowledge. Virya, strength. Surandhita, well regulated. Ashayaha, aim of life. Svaparshinana, with the heel of one's foot. Apidya, by blocking Gudam, the air hole. Tataha, thereafter. Anilam, life air. Sthaneshu, in the places. Shatshu, 6 primary. Unnamayet, must be lifted. Jitaklamaha, by extinguishing material desires. Translation. By the strength of scientific knowledge, one should be well situated in absolute realization and thus be able to extinguish all material desires. One should then give up the material body by blocking the air hole through which stool is evacuated with the heel of one's foot and by lifting the life air from one place to another in the 6 primary places. Purport. There are many Duratmas who claim to have realized themselves as Brahman and yet are unable to conquer material desires. In the Bhagavad Gita, 18th chapter, text 54, it is clearly explained that an absolutely self-realized soul becomes completely aloof from all material desires. Material desires are based on the false ego of the living being and are exhibited by his childish and useless activities to conquer the laws of material nature and by his desire to lord it over the resources of the 5 elements. With such a mentality, one is led to believe in the strength of material science with its discovery of atomic energy and space travel by mechanical vehicles. And by such tiny advancements in material science, the false egoist tries to challenge even the strength of the Supreme Lord, who can finish all man's tiny endeavors in less than a second. The well-situated self, or Brahman-realized soul, perfectly understands the Supreme Brahman, or the personality of Godhead, is the all-powerful Vasudeva, and that he, the self-realized living being, is a part and parcel of the Supreme Whole. As such, his constitutional position is to cooperate with him in all respects, in the transcendental relation of the served and servitor. Such a self-realized soul ceases to exhibit his useless activities of attempting to lord it over material nature. Being scientifically well-informed, he fully engages himself in faithful devotion to the Lord. The expert yogi who has thoroughly practiced the control of the life air by the prescribed method of the yoga system is advised to quit the body as follows. He should plug up the evacuating hole with the heel of the foot and then progressively move the life air on and on to 6 places: the navel, abdomen, heart, chest, palate, eyebrows, and cerebral pit. Controlling the life air by the prescribed yogic process is mechanical, and the practice is more or less a physical endeavor for spiritual perfection. In olden days, such practice was very common for the transcendentalist, for the mode of life and character in those days were favorable. But in modern days, when the influence of Kali age is so disturbing, practically everyone is untrained in this art of bodily exercise. Concentration of the mind is more easily attained in these days by the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. The results are more effective than those derived from the inner exercise of the life air. Again, the translation. By the strength of scientific knowledge, one should be well situated in the absolute realization and thus be able to extinguish all material desires. One should then give up the material body by blocking the air hole through which stool is evacuated with the heel of one's foot and by lifting the life air from one place to another in the 6 primary places. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratushe Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hello, welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class. I was just remembering when I read this purport, I saw an advertisement because when I go on Facebook, obviously the advertisements are tailored to the sort of things I see. So I'll either get advertisements for really weird cults around Sydney, or I'll get advertisements for yoga groups or meditation. And I was reminded when Srila Prabhupada said, in modern days, when the influence of Kali Age is so disturbing, practically everyone is untrained in this art of bodily exercise. And I saw an advertisement for beer yoga, where people will drink beer and do yoga at the same time to help get in a relaxed mood. So I think that sort of reflected the untrained mind, that people need to sort of entertain themselves with something that's very contradictory to the practice of yoga in order to stay engaged. But we read here, there are many Duratmas who have no self-control. And because of this, their false ego is allowed to express itself in the form of material desires and attachments. And I think that's a very interesting point, because often we think that material attachments or material activities arise from desire, that they arise from the want for joy or for the want of things. But here we can read that actually desire itself is unavoidable. It's the natural state of the soul to desire joy. To extinguish that is unnatural. It's our full propensity, and if it's not an unnatural propensity, it's not one to be extinguished, and it is not one that can be extinguished. However, when the false ego engages and the sort of desire to be the controller comes in, one then finds that the matra sparshastu kanteya shitoshna sukha dukkadaha. We often emphasize that it is unavoidable that we will engage in material sufferings, but that shloka says sukha dukkha. Joys are also unavoidable in a sense. It is not an aversion to joy. Joys will happen naturally, and so will suffering. What causes the material activity is when the false ego engages and experiencing some sort of material joy, it says, oh, I like this. And then even though it is within the natural constitutional nature of the material world that such joy will fleetingly go away, that ahankar, that desire to be the controller kicks in, and suddenly the materialist says, no, maybe I can control this material nature and make sure then it's only the sukha that's happening. It's that desire to exert one's influence over onto material existence that is, in one sense, that root for all of material attachments. Because if one were to truly have that understanding that this whole material cosmos is beyond the control of ourselves, then, well, then one can easily allow them to go ahead. So I think it's an interesting point from Srila Prabhupada here that rather than, as is normally done, attribute material attachments to desires, which is also true, because it is that desire misexpressed. In another sense, these material attachments arise from that platform of excessive ahankar, of that desire to be the Ishvar, to lord it over this world. And so we see then, what is that result? Srila Prabhupada here very nicely reduces all of the achievements of material science. The atomic energy and space travel are considered such tiny advancements, and of course they are. Srila Prabhupada's first real book that was distributed out, Easy Journey to Other Planets, so wonderfully just tears this whole view apart. So much money, so much time the government is spending to achieve what a yogi can just by self-control and tapasya. But we see now today, obviously, I think we've heard enough of the whole corona thing going on, but we're seeing just how tiny these achievements are. The whole, all of the governments and everyone are completely scared. Everyone's locked away and sort of restricting all their movements. And why? There was so much confidence and cockiness that science, the advanced civilization, we're secure now. I remember in high school, one of my teachers, he was actually one of my better teachers. I remember once he said, don't pay attention in your subjects. He said, it's all sort of nonsense. And then even once he said, those Hindu guys in India, I think they've got a better idea than what we have. But still, he was still a speculator and all of the standard stuff. And I remember one day he said, it's too late for me, but realistically, you guys might never die. Science is getting that good. I reckon none of you guys will die. You guys are young enough, you'll be able to be immune. And now we're seeing it's a not so friendly reminder that we all are going to die with this virus going around. And all of that, all of that confidence that the world had is now being thrown away. There was just a few days ago, so many of my friends will say, oh, this can't happen to me. Not with the virus, just in general, like someone won't be able to pay their bills or something. They say, this isn't meant to happen. The government's meant to look out for me. And now the government doesn't know what to do. It's being held at the mercy of a tiny virus that we can't even see. All of these grand conglomerates of all the power and money in the world, and what can they do? Celebrities, everyone. My mother texted me telling me to come back to Port Macquarie to avoid, now it's in Port Macquarie, but she told me then, before it got to Port Macquarie, she said, oh, quickly retreat, because it's in Sydney and you're going to get infected. And then I said, no, if it'll happen, I'll try and avoid it, but it'll hit Port Macquarie anyways. And then she said, oh no, but Tom Hanks has got it. And then I said, well, I'll stop hanging out with Tom Hanks then. But yeah, people are shocked. They're saying, oh no, the Prime Minister of Canada, his wife has got it, Tom Hanks has got it, I don't know any other celebrities, but I'm seeing their faces going around, and they've got it, and they've got it. Because ultimately, with all of their exercises in material advancements, they are just as vulnerable to death and disease and all of those other processes of material life as we are. And so I think it's a somewhat friendly reminder that material endeavor is pointless, and that ultimately, His Holiness Bhakti Vikash Maharaj was doing a class on this, and he said, coronavirus, maybe I'll get it, maybe you'll get it. Even if I don't get it, I'm still going to die soon. What's the fuss? This is the nature of material life. All this serves as a reminder for people that their endeavors are empty. It is. We read just a few texts ago in Bhagavatam. There's one of my favorite verses where it says, "This world is only a world of names. It's only a transformation of these 5 elements, and we put a different name to different transformations, and then we're so satisfied with so many varieties." His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj would often say, we are like children in a playground with 5 toys, and we sort of move them around and we feel satisfied, as if that's somehow some sort of satisfying existence. So in the same way, all these things are going around, and all these transformations of the transient world are occurring. And we know this. There's one pastime of Maharaj Katwanga. Maharaj Katwanga was the son of Kevata, who was a king with a great underwater aquatic kingdom, and he had many sons, and he was a rather opulent king, and his eldest son was Katwanga. And Katwanga had a son himself, a daughter, who he called Ketavi. She was very, very beautiful, and he was thinking, I want to get her married off to one of the greatest people in existence. So he thought, who else better to help me than Brahma? So he went and he traveled up all of the material planets up to the highest of Brahmalok. And when he arrived, he sort of knocked on the front door, so to speak, and the assistant came out and said, sorry, Brahmaji, he's busy right now. He'll be with you later. He's being entertained by some Gandharvas now. So as I think it's interesting when we hear these sort of pastimes of the higher planets, the heavenly planets, because obviously we hear they're such great places of joy. But when we look at it from a devotional perspective, they seem really just terrible. surely Gandharvas will be far more entertaining than entertainment here, but it still just seems like the same sort of thing, just a whole lot better. And in one sense, that makes it a whole lot worse, because it's hard enough for us here to have material enjoyment and then not think, hey, this is actually pretty good. Maybe this isn't so bad. How much worse would it be to be entertained to such a high level? Maybe then it'll be, what's so hard to overcome here would be even harder there. So when we hear that, it's sort of, why would one want to go to a place where it's just the same sort of unsatisfying thing that's so inherently terrible, just put on to a larger time scale? And it is to a larger time scale, because after this show, how long could it be? Brahma then leaves and... it wasn't Maharaj Khatpanga. I got it mixed up. It was Maharaj... Kakudmi, yeah. So Maharaj Kakudmi. And Kakudmi, so he says, this is my daughter, I want to have her married off to the great, to whoever, And then Brahma looked at him and he smiled and he sort of had a giggle and he said, well, in the time you've been waiting, quite a few Chatur Yugas have passed. Everyone you've ever known, every single friend, every single family member, every single person you thought would be ideal has been dead, and has been dead so long that they're forgotten. There's nothing left. All of the knowledge, all of the history that you know, in one sense, is still there. One description given for the term Trikalagya, given to rishis, is they are Trikalagya not only in the sense that they know past, present, and future, but that they know the true nature of past, present, future. If one studies the Shastras, one knows it's all just mixing up the same sort of themes. Maybe in one Satya Yuga, one pastime happens differently. As we know, sometimes Bhagavatam mixes up different Satya Yugas and you get a bit confused. But in general, the reason why that can be done is because all of history is just a repeat of the same sort of material play. So in one sense, it's the same thing, but in the other sense, all of the people you knew, all of the people you identified with, they were gone like that. This is the relative and temporary nature of material knowledge. And that's why it is so inherently tied to mortality. It is built upon that transient foundation. So he hears this, and then of course Brahma says, marry her off to Baladev. He doesn't exactly have that problem. He'll be around for a while, and he does so. But this is an illustrative sort of thing that material knowledge is so inherently flawed. And of course we know the famous Jiva Goswami pulls apart Pratyaksha and Anuman as sources of knowledge. It's not that sense perception and logic are useless, but they are imperfect, and they're not going to give any perfect knowledge. We know the four faults, Praman, Vipralipsa, Brahma, I've forgotten the last one, but they're the ability to be illusioned, imperfect senses, making mistake, and of course the cheating propensity. And all these things naturally make material knowledge faulty. But furthermore, the scientific endeavor is even more faulty. I was reading a book, I don't know if you have any recollection of the different newspapers, but the Guardian newspaper is known as the most progressive, secular, atheistic newspaper in the world. They're very, very, very to the atheistic side of things. And they wrote a review of this one book by a Christian theologian called The Experience of God. And they said, if any atheist should read a book, they should read this book. And the author, I've known him for a while, David Bentley Hart. I like him because he's a big fan of Ramanujacharya. And he actually, even though he's a Christian theologian, he'll often quote Ramanujacharya. And actually, when he wrote his book, he said the best way to defend this idea of God is if we think of him as a being composed with three general qualities, existence, consciousness, and bliss, or Satchidananda, and he quotes the Upanishads. So he's a somewhat, again, unfortunately, outside of a parampara system, he's speculating, but at least he's somewhat favorable and open-minded. So his book was somewhat better than a lot of the other books going around. And he makes this point. He says the scientific endeavor is so cocky because what they do is they say, look at religion. What sort of scientific contribution have they done? But what they've done is they've taken all of their achievements and they've said these are the only achievements that matter, because we don't accept any achievement that doesn't come out of empirical, materialistic views. He said it's like putting on a red lens over your glasses and then saying blue things don't matter, or I don't believe blue things exist. When you narrow down your field of search, when you narrow down what you see as valid knowledge to only that which comes from, well, not his language, but ours, pratyaksha and anuman, then obviously you're going to reject all those things. And that's not an intellectual pursuit, that's one of narrow-mindedness. And furthermore, this idea, at least we can appeal to Shabda as a perfect authority by which we can justify a view of pratyaksha being the ultimate source of authority. But by sense perception alone, one cannot make any philosophical statements. One cannot justify the pramanas of the senses through only the means of pratyaksha and anuman, because you have no foundation. If we are to be the conglomerate of just random particles, then the thoughts we have are also just random things. They can't have any justification for any logic, and therefore there can be no way to dogmatically assert that science is true. And yet dogmatism is seen as the fault of the spiritualist, even though the scientist by nature has to be dogmatic in his methodology. But yeah, so there we hear those things. And as far as that pursuit of dogmatism goes, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur actually, rather interestingly, he discusses Kamsa. He discusses Kamsa, and he discusses him as actually representing the empiricist in society. He says in this one essay, he writes about how in society we can find few people from Krishna Lila. They represent the trends of modern society. There's Putana, who represents the false guru, and then there's Kamsa, who represents the empiricist. Of course, Putana represents the false guru, I'm sure we would have heard, because in the same way that the false guru will take young spiritual children, and she will smother them and kill their spiritual lives by giving them false teachings, pretending to teach them just as Putana pretended to nurture these babies with a breast, but instead had poison on them. In the same way, the false guru will take to nurture these children, but poison them with false teaching. In that way, Putana represents the false guru, and Kamsa, he represents the materialist. He is an empiricist himself, not even metaphorically, but literally, Bhaktisiddhanta said. Of course, he had studied the Vedas. At the time, everyone did. But he held to what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur calls the lexicographical interpretation of the Vedas. Madhavananda Prabhu published this essay, republished it, and in his note, he says the lexicographical interpretation of the Vedas is that which is sticking to the grammatical rules and interpreting it in a mundane fashion, because lexicography is the study of words. So if one takes it just to be words and grammatical relations, then one will come up with so many mundane ideas. And then he says, the fear that was struck in Kamsa's heart is also the fear of all the empiricists. Because what happens if the transcendental being, what happens if transcendence himself appears in this world? Then suddenly all the empirical methods are cast away. All of the notions and assumptions of the empirical worldview are flung away, and therefore Kamsa felt fear, because he was so certain, he was so confident that in his empirical methods, in his lexicographical understandings, along with all of his colleagues. So what happens? And then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada writes a really, really sweet line before he begins to discuss Putana. He says, this fear is justified because every time transcendence does appear, such false notions are cast away. And then there is an interesting example then, if we take further the Kamsa as representing the materialist. Because we hear when spiritualists are told that they are going to die. Maharaj Parikshit was told, and we just finished going through the first canto, and we read extensively how well he displayed how one should die. How one should die. They should hear with 7 days left, and then they should go and they should try to understand Srimad Bhagavatam, or in his case, to try to understand the supreme truth, and then in that method hear Bhagavatam. And then we come to Maharaj Khatvanga, who himself, he assisted the demigods in fighting the demons very expertly because of his great martial ability. And he assisted the demigods, and as normally happens, when you assist the demigods, you get a material boon, you get you get an offering of some sort. So after assisting them, and no one could stand in his way, he killed so many demons, and the demigods said, well, we'll give you something, And Maharaj Khatwanga, he was very pious, so he didn't really have any need for whatever other people ask for, you know, I don't want to die or something like that, something absurd like that. No, instead he just said, I would like to know when I will die. And then, of course, the demigods told him, in one muhurta, in just a moment you will die. And normally people would panic if they were to hear they will die instantly. But instead he says, well, actually, my whole life I've loved the Brahmins, the representatives of spiritual life and society, because back then they were the representatives of spiritual society. They still are now if we find the Brahmins in quality, but the Brahmins in name today leave much to be desired in a lot of cases. So he says, I've loved the Brahmins more than I've loved even my life. I've loved them more than I love my family or my wife, my children. I've loved all of these, so I can renounce these things. And factually, my whole life I've not been so, even though I've been living in a material world, and I've not had any real practical, functional attachment to it. So I will renounce this world, and with this one moment I have, and then of course he does renounce the world. And Srila Prabhupada says this is a fantastic example of how one should leave his body. So we have here two examples. One was told he only has a moment. Maharaj Parikshit was told he has 7 days. Kamsa was told he has at least 8 years, and he panicked and tried to control. He panicked and tried to kill all of the children, and he did all these plans, and he went into his little world of Maya. And there we see again the empiricist trying to avoid death, even with so far away. The transcendentalist hears death is around the corner, and he says, so what? This is a good opportunity, in fact, for me. Now I don't need to worry about maintaining myself. I can fully commit to the spiritual endeavor. But the materialist hears that death is almost a decade away, and he panics and tries to control and lord it over the material nature. He plans so many great things to avoid this death, and we're seeing that again now so much with the panic that the world is in now. So there. Because, of course, the scientists, they cannot get true knowledge. There are 5 levels of knowledge discussed in the Vedic literature. And they are on the lowest level, pratyaksha. Pratyaksha itself can sometimes, when being referred to, include, of course, anuman as well. And in that sense, pratyaksha is the lowest level. That is, I see and I do not understand. I think I understand, but functionally I do not understand. A little higher than that is paroksha, to see through the eyes of another. Bhaktivinoda Thakur will use this term to also refer to the collective discoveries of man throughout history. As they come together and as they contribute their knowledge, that is a higher source of knowledge, because you're not just relying on your sense perception and your intelligence, but that of the collective humanity. Faulty as it can be, although Srila Prabhupada sometimes also includes parampara knowledge when it is discussing the material world in this category, but also material knowledge can also be there. Faulty as it can be, it is still better than just what I can think of in one lifetime. So this collective knowledge is then paroksha, seeing through the eyes of another is one definition one can pull. Higher than paroksha is aparoksha. And aparoksha then, of course, is a negation of that, not seeing through the eyes of another, or rather realizing that truth themselves. This is the platform, this is all on, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says this is somewhat on still the mundane platform, and then it is the aroha pantha, it is the ascending process still. The aparoksha platform can be aroha when it leads on to the later platforms, but avaroha, but in general it is the ascending way of knowledge. So, but this sense is higher. And on the platform of aparoksha, this is the level that maybe impersonalists can get to. Actually, impersonalists will not accept the higher levels. They will say the fullness of truth is found on the aparoksha level, when you realize this whole world is maya and you transcend it. So aparoksha then also sometimes then will be used to refer to impersonalist liberation. It's that emptiness, but it's also that realization in devotional service, is that practical realization of the truths of paroksha. But then even higher than that is adhokshaja. Adhokshaja is information about a realm that we cannot perceive at all. At this level, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says it is still on the Vaidhi Marg, but Srila Prabhupada says it is on the Rag Marg. At this platform, we are beginning, and in one sense both are true, It is not on the Rag Marg because we are not directly perceiving the pastimes. But on the other hand, it is the information that is needed to enter in there. So that's why there's a bit of a discrepancy, but the essence is still the same. At this point, one begins hearing about Krishna. And this is also named Krishna, Adhokshaja Krishna, because Krishna is beyond our material senses. Yes? And then highest, of course, is Aprakrita, or sometimes Divya Pratyaksha. We start where we began. We end where we began. But this is a transcendental Pratyaksha, when the transcendental Leelas are fully being perceived by the devotee. And that is the highest and fullest form of perception. Then one stops seeing this world of names, this world which passes away like that if one goes to visit Brahma, and one begins to perceive the true eternal reality, which is not which is life-giving and eternal by its very nature. Because it never began, it will never end. So those are the different levels of knowledge. And we hear that Krishna is Adhokshaja. He is beyond the senses. We hear in the Brahma Samhita, Yam Shyam Sundaram Achintya Guna Surupam Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Krishna is beyond the sense perception. The scientist tries to reach him and says, I want to see Krishna, show me this Krishna you're talking about. But they do not understand, because again, they've not taken this knowledge to understand that Krishna is, his qualities are inconceivable. They're inconceivable to the mundane approach of man. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's discussed that in the Adi Leela, it is in the Adi Leela, we hear that we hear Mahaprabhu as a young child debating that Kashmiri, the poet. And he was debating him, and one of the points when he goes through the ornaments and the faults of his poetry, one of the ornaments he discusses is actually there's a thing called Virodhabhash. Virodhabhasha is an ornament in Sanskrit literature, which is that of the contradiction. It's when you speak somewhat contradictorily or inconceivably or illogically or paradoxically, and yet it somehow makes sense, that is considered an ornament. And one is that from the lotus feet of the Lord, the Ganga is coming. That doesn't make sense. Krishna Das Kaviraj Thakur, Srila Mahaprabhu describes according to Krishna Das Kaviraj Thakur, because as we know, the lotus comes from water, not that water comes from the lotus. How can this make sense? And then Mahaprabhu says, but it can make sense, because Krishna is having the Chintya Shakti. He is inconceivable. And because of that, this ornament is very beautiful. This is some of the praise he gives. And of course, we know he gives 5 points of praise and then 5 points of less than praise. 5 faults in the poetry. Later on in, I think, the next chapter, it's said, it's discussing, of course, we know this, the great topic of Mahaprabhu being the devotee, taking the mood of the gopis, and also being Krishna. And then Krishna Das Kaviraj Thakur, there he writes, She Krishna, She Gopi, this is Param Birod, this is the greatest of all contradictions. But then he says what? He says this is possible by what? The Ochinto Choritro Pravur. Pravur means of the Lord, of Mahaprabhu. And of course, Achintya means Achintya, and Chitra means the character, the Chaitanya Charitra. Oh no, yeah, the Charitra. The Charitra of the Lord, the character. It is by the nature, the inconceivable character of the Lord, by which all of these contradictions can occur. And then of course, we read the famous verses in Ishopanishad. We read that Krishna is faster than all those running. The demigods cannot approach him. He moves, but he does not move, so on and so forth. And rather interestingly, that verse which is rendered, Deva. The Devas cannot reach him. And we know this is true when we read the 10th canto. All of the demigods need to go to the milk ocean when Bhumi becomes as the form of the cow and then complains. They cannot go directly to the Lord. They must go to Shweta Dweep on the milk ocean. That is the limit, so to speak, of how to approach the Supreme Lord. But another meaning that's given, both by Baladev Vidyabhushan and by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, is of course Deva also refers to our senses, because each one of our senses is predominated by a different demigod. And in this sense, the Lord is beyond all the demigods, also meaning that he is beyond all our senses. Because if the demigods who preside our senses cannot reach him, then how can those senses reach him? So we read there a bit further. And so this inconceivable potency of Krishna is so defining of him. Srila Prabhupada often would encounter this issue, meeting with these new devotees that he was creating. The Western mindset is, again, so defined by science that we want to understand everything so quickly and so scientifically. We cannot have the humility to accept that transcendence is infinite. And of course, once Srila Prabhupada was talking to a person who had received Krishna book, not a devotee, but he had read Krishna book, and Srila Prabhupada was talking to him, and Srila Prabhupada asked, well, what did you think of this book? And the person said, I think some of the things that happen are rather fantastical. And Srila Prabhupada said, I think you are rather fantastical. To think that the Lord, the infinite Lord, is not, Srila Prabhupada writes, for the Supreme Lord to be the Supreme Lord who is capable of all things, he must be capable of inconceivability. To think that the Supreme Lord is limited by what your mind thinks is fantastical or not, this means you are the fantastical ones. And all these sort of contradictions occur. Tripurari Maharaj once asked Srila Prabhupada, because Tripurari Maharaj was one of the first to read Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he read, of course, in the Gundicha Marjan Leela, Srila Prabhupada writes, it is an offense to pay respect to the spiritual master in front of the murti. And then Tripurari Maharaj asked Srila Prabhupada, but we are doing that every day with Guru Puja. What's the thing there? And Srila Prabhupada looked at him and he said, contradiction, and then kept on walking. At one point, there's so many things going on. How can we fully try to wrap our heads around it? Again, in that specific pastime, it was just follow the instructions of the spiritual master and don't overthink it. But yeah, and there's another time Srila Prabhupada was asked, because they were going, traveling, through Vrindavan. And you travel through Vrindavan and you hear Krishna did this here, and then you take, well, if you're me, you take a rickshaw ride, but some people who are more pious and they'll walk. Or on parikrama, we will walk. And they'll see these long distances, and these are places where Krishna is meant to have been going every day. He's going here and here and here. And one of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, he said, Srila Prabhupada, how did Krishna do it? Like we are walking around, and one day he's going here and he's going there, he's walking so many kilometers. And Srila Prabhupada said, Vrindavan is like a lotus. When the lotus petals are out, they are so far away. But when Krishna wants, they all close together and they come like this. This is inconceivable. We cannot understand how a place can be like a lotus. And there's one more pastime I remember from that same trip. One devotee had picked up a book and he said, Srila Prabhupada, I've been reading all these books. And I've read this one book about the geography of Vrindavan, and it's really interesting. It's really helping me relish Krishna book because I can visualize all of the places. And then he says, but I was reading about Govardhan, and I measured the dimensions, and I sort of thought, I was reading through Krishna book, and I was reading through Govardhan Leela, where Krishna is giving shelter to all the devotees. But Nanda Baba, he has this many cows, and there are this many denizens of Vrindavan. And if you were to take the average size of all of them and add them all together, they wouldn't be able to fit on the Govardhan hill. And he says, Srila Prabhupada, what do we do? And Srila Prabhupada looked at him, and he looked at the book, and he said, you read too much. So the Lord is inconceivable and beyond our understanding. So of course the materialist will not be able to understand. The materialist will not be able to approach, because he will try to grab that infinite being who is a chintya guna swarupam, and he will take that infinity, and with the fist of his finite mind he will try to hold him shut. But really all we can do to an infinity, when we are met with a greater source, we can only really surrender to it. That is the only way. And it is good then that we don't need to understand the Supreme Lord. The quest of the Jnani is somewhat insufficient, because how can we ever understand infinity being such a small? We are, we are the small Chaitanya. We are the small consciousness. Chaitanya in that context, meaning consciousness. How can we absorb then that whole ocean of Satchidananda, from which we are a tiny spark from? But we don't need to, because we don't need to be conscious of the Lord in order to fully enable our existence. We need to love Him and serve Him with devotion. And so we know there's the famous pastime of Krishna. Krishna's friends came just after the other gopis were complaining to Jashoda Mata, saying, Krishna, he's doing this, he's doing that. And then Jashoda says, okay, I'll take off his ornaments so he can't see at night. And then they say, oh, somehow he's effulgent. Somehow or another, I don't know how he does it, but he's still effulgent, he can still see. After these complaints are done, this is considered the complaints coming from Vatsalya Ras. Later, we have the complaints coming from Vismay Ras, which is another rasa in rasa theory. Obviously, we know there's the main rasas, but Rupa Goswami, when he introduces this idea, or not introduces, but discovers this idea of all the rasas being present, he will also, the whole rasa theory has many sub-rasas, and this way of interpreting the pastimes is done. He will show how this rasa, besides the predominant ones that we hear about that we can relate with the Lord, for dramatic purposes, these other rasas will appear. Within those relationships, these leelas themselves also have rasas. And this is the Vismay ras, the rasa of astonishment. His friends are astonished, they're almost kind of impressed, but they also are complaining to Jashodama, Krishna is eating dirt. And then Jashodama, she grabs him. Again, we hear the inconceivable potency of the Lord. That same Lord who we just heard in Ishopanishad is moving in such a way that the demigods cannot reach him, but the simple Jashodama, who is, by some calculations, not as fast as Indra, maybe, she can grab him and hold him. And then that same Lord, who is so beyond them that he does not need to worry, looks at her with fear. This is the inconceivable potency. And then with fear he looks, and then, of course, I'm running out of time, so I won't go too long, but we hear that whole pastime that then she says, Krishna, you're running around here and there. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, when she is saying this, her Vatsalya Ras is coming out the most strongest. She's saying, why do you need to run around here and there? At home, am I not serving you nicely enough? Do I not have enough nice preparations? And then she says, all of your friends, and even Balaram, they're complaining. You know, I could believe it was a lie if it was just your friends. They always want to get you in trouble because they think it's funny. But Balaram, your oldest brother, who is always serving you and taking care of you so nicely, would he lie? No, this cannot be a lie. And then Krishna says, well then look in my mouth. I have not eaten dirt. And then of course he opens his mouth and then she sees all of creation. She sees even herself. And this is considered in the commentaries. This is our material universe, she sees. Just to emphasize that this is the Achintya Shakti. It is not that Krishna created an illusion. It is not that Krishna created a show. She is literally seeing the same material universe that she is transcendentally dwelling in. And actually it is said it wasn't in his mouth, but it was in his belly. When Jashoda looked, that whole material universe, she looked through his mouth, through his throat, but it was in his belly that the whole cosmic, all of existence was manifested. And everything, all the planetary systems, even the three modes of material nature, how could she perceive those? It's considered that she saw the presiding demigods, and then she saw their effects. That is how we understand that she saw the three modes of material nature. She saw all these things, and then she thought, wow. And then she began praying to the Supreme Lord. But it is not to be understood that she prayed to the Supreme Lord because she thought Krishna was the Supreme Lord. Because she was thinking, how could Krishna do these things? Maybe he's the Supreme Personality, maybe he's having all these mystic potencies, but in her mind she's rejecting these. In fact, she even rejects that he is the Supreme Lord. Why? Because he was hungry. She was just earlier feeding him. How can the Supreme Lord be hungry? How can the all-satisfied Supreme Being be hungry for milk? So he is not the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Instead, she's just so shocked and bewildered, she thinks, I should just pray. And then she has a realization. She says, actually, I am somewhat under Maya. I am not Jashoda. I am not the mother of Krishna. I'm thinking I am the doer. I'm thinking I'm identifying with all these things. Instead, we should focus on the Lord. He is the doer of all things. I am not protecting Krishna. Krishna is not protecting Krishna. The Supreme Lord is protecting Krishna. I am under illusion thinking I am the wife of Nanda Baba. That is not my true form. I am under Maya right now. And then she begins thinking like this. And then it's understood. Then Krishna sees this and he realizes, oh no. Oh no. And this is specifically the commentary that is given. Krishna then begins to worry. Krishna then says, who will feed me if Mother Jashoda begins to renounce the world? Who will care for me? And with that fear in his heart, then Yogamaya comes, and then suddenly Jashoda Mashi becomes filled. That word Maya can also be using to refer to the Vatsalya Ras in that specific way that it's given. So she's filled then with the Vatsalya Ras, and then suddenly she thinks, oh no, this is Krishna, I must feed him. And then she feeds him. And then that pastime is finished with some glorification. And in that glorification, it is said that that same Krishna, that same Gopal, who in all the Vedas is glorified, who all of the yagyas ultimately are meant for. This is Madhvacharya's opinion. He so strongly pressed this view. That's why they're so much oriented around yagyas, that all the names of these demigods that are given for yagyas are originally names for Krishna. And therefore the process of yagya is there only to worship Krishna. in its true form. This is the opinion of Madhvacharya. So all of these things, all of them, this is Krishna is the purpose of them. And yet Mother Jashoda ignores all of this, and she merely feeds him as his child. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, this is the glory. This is the glory of Jashodama. This is the glory that she has even over Devaki. Because Devaki saw the opulence of Krishna and she worshipped him. Jashoda saw the opulence of Krishna and then forgot it. That is the glory. And he says this verse actually should be considered the Paribhash Sutra of any pastime where Aishvarya is coming out of Krishna, when he is trying to manifest mainly his Madhurya. We should understand that this verse here should be understood as a sort of Paribhash Sutra. So this is Achintya Guna Swarupam. This is the inconceivable potency of the Lord who is beyond our senses. So that is the fault of the materialists. They're all looking around for all sorts of things, trying to find solutions. But really, what they should do, rather than trying to overcome all these problems or go to the moon or build all of these grand plans and things, rather they should just surrender their intelligence, because the actual truth, which is eternal and which isn't temporary, which will not fade away, that actual truth is Achintya Gunaswarupam, is beyond the mind. He is Adhokshaja, and therefore humility and acceptance and surrender to that Lord is truly how they will get any knowledge. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Nantakoti Vaishnavrinda ki jai.